Dynamic format strings have existed for quite some time, but now they're in Power BI Desktop. I'm going to show you some cool things that you can do using them. First thing that I'm going to show you is to use a slicer to select how many decimals you'd like to show in your charts. Also, I'm going to be able to show you how to add context to your data labels. Here I'm showing year over year, but that can easily show month over month. And finally, I'm going to show you how you can use dynamic format strings to indicate the highest and lowest points on any kind of chart. And that, of course, changes based on the selected data. And let's get started. So the first thing that you have to do is actually activate. And in order to do that, you need to download the April 2023 version of Power BI Desktop. And then you need to select File, go to Options and Settings, click on Options. And what that's going to do is it's going to take you to the options panel. You're going to go to preview features and select the dynamic format string for measures. Click that on, hit OK. And if you don't have this already selected, it's going to ask you to restart your Power BI desktop. No need to worry, just, it's like do it. And once it restarts, you'll be able to actually use it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the sample data that comes with the Power BI desktop, and we're just going to get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to create a measure table. And in the measure table, essentially there is only one measure that I'm going to use for everything, and that's going to be the sum of sales. Now, this is a little bit, it's like tricky because although I am going to be using only the sum of sales, it's going to have different dynamic string formats for each different version of the measure that I show. So it's not necessarily true. I am going to be creating a lot more measures. And that starts right here at level 1. We're going to be creating currency symbols that are going to be changing the format string depending on what country data is showing. In order to do this, I need to add a table into the data model. So I am going to do that right now, where I am going to add some data that looks like this. So now I'm showing the country, the currency, and the symbol, and I'm going to call this currency. Now we're just going to make sure that the currency table is correctly connected to the financials table. And we can see that in the modeling view, the country is connected to the country by a single direction, which is exactly what we want. Now I'm going to show you what this actually looks like. If we show the country from the currency, we can see that the currency and the symbol are indeed correct. But now if we throw in the sum of sales, we can actually see, let me make this a table again. We can actually see that we have the sum of sales here. Now the important part is going to be when I start creating the new measures. I'm going to create another measure that I'm going to call the currency format string. I'm going to go into the measure tools and I'm going to make sure that the format is now dynamic. Once it's dynamic, a place for me to write some code, DAX code, is going to show up, and I'm going to be able to put in whatever I want to become the dynamic format string. Now I'm going to put this value in, and once I do that, you're going to be able to see that once I have this item selected and I throw it in, it's going to actually have the exact currency added to the format itself. And this is actually really great. Dynamic format strings are a layer on top of the actual values. So you can still order this in, it's like by smallest to largest or largest to smallest. And the fact that it has some text on top of it does not change the functionality. This is really nice. And I'm going to show you how you can also create another measure, which is instead of using the currency, is going to use the symbol. Now this is a little bit different because you can see that the symbol actually comes at the front of the format string. So if I throw that into the table as well, you're going to see that now the actual symbol for the currency is at the front and not at the back. And with that, we're going to move on to level 2, which is going to be the decimal slicer. In order to make this work, first we have to create a dynamic parameter to use as the slicer itself. So this is going to be in modeling, and under new parameter, select numeric range. And we're going to call it decimal parameter. It's going to be a whole number, and I'm going to set the maximum to be 4. I usually don't think more than 4 decimals is necessary in a Power BI report. We'll set the default to 2, and I don't want a slicer because this isn't the page I'm going to use. Fantastic. So now we have a decimal parameter, and I'm going to put a decimal parameter slicer into the page here. Great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to change the dynamic format string of this measure that I've already created, the symbol format string. I'm going to go to the measure, select format, and I'm going to change this from the selected value currency symbol to something completely different. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding one variable, which is going to call the selected decimal parameter value. If it's greater than 0, then I do want a period. So it's going to mean that if there isn't any decimal selected, if the decimal parameter is 0, it's not going to show a period afterwards because that would look really weird. But if there is more than a 0, it's going to take the value 0 and repeat it a specific number of times in a text string. That's what the REPT, the repeat function, does in DAX. And in this way, what I can do is I can take this original standalone format string, add the number of decimals that I want to it, and then add the currency symbol. So if we click OK, what this is going to do is it's going to change the dynamic format string so that if I select, for example, 0, you can actually see that now the full stop, the period, has disappeared. But if I select 1, 2, or 3, the number of decimals increases. So that's a pretty cool level 2. So level 3 is going to be showing you how you can create an automatic display unit to be embedded into your actual measures. So I'm going to start by creating a new measure, automatic display units. And we're going to set this to dynamic as well. Now, this one is going to be a little bit different because the automatic display units is going to be something that you might have seen before if you've been following my channel. But in case you haven't, let me explain this piece of DAX to you. What it's going to do is it's going to make sure that first, it's going to take the value of the measure into an integer. So it gets rid of all of the decimals. It's going to convert that into a string, and then it's going to take the number of characters it has in a string. So if you have something like 1,000, that's going to be 4 different characters. And then, of course, what you would want to do is if the value is actually not going to work for any one of these, it means that it's not an actual number, in which case it's going to be considered as 0. Now, if that's the case, then it's going to take the number of digits, and if it has more than 13, it's going to recognize that it is in fact trillion. So it's going to simply do this, it's like format string. It's going to use this format string. If it's less than 10 number of digits, it's going to recognize that it's a billion value and use this format string, and so on and so forth. And essentially what I'm going to show you is that it's going to simply return one of these strings, and it's going to use that as the format. Now, the reason that this works is because in between each of these commas, the DAX code actually recognizes that there should be 3 different characters. There's actually not. It's just, it's like comma after comma. Because there is no character in between these commas, what the DAX format string is actually recognizing is that none of the characters between these commas should actually exist. So the fact that there is 4 different commas here means that for 4 of these, so for 12 values, the actual values in the number will not show. And it's the same for billions for here, because there's 3 commas right after each other, 9 of the values are going to disappear. It's like comma, so that's 3 values disappearing here, 6 values disappearing here. And that's why this works. It works just fine. I'm going to show you this right now. So if I take this automatic display string, you can see that now the display unit is actually showing really nicely. But there's a caveat. This doesn't work 100% if you are trying to do something. Let me show you where I'm going to take the financials. I'm going to throw in the date. And now if I throw in, for example, data labels, it doesn't work. The way that you resolve this is that if you actually go to the dynamic format string once again, you can actually change from the format and you can change it into a string measure. What you do with this piece of code right here is you are formatting the selected measure, so the actual value at each point, and you are formatting this into the actual format that you've selected. What this does is it's going to generate an actual string. So this is basically the same thing as doing something like this, where if I was to put something like text, you can actually see that all of the markers are now showing a specific text value, and it works inside the chart. And if I go back and I change the format to show the text that I want it to show, this dynamic text that I've created here, it's going to show automatic display units based on my selection. The caveat here is that, of course, the y-axis doesn't work with dynamic format strings. This is a problem that's existed with calculation groups as well, and I personally don't know how to figure it out, but it's still pretty nice. And I'm going to be able to show you right now how you can also convert this automatic display units to incorporate what I just showed you, which was the selectable decimal places. Essentially, what I've done is I have made this a little bit sparser, and then it's going to take the number of decimals as this piece of code, and this decimals is going to go into the suffix, and whether or not the number of digits is a certain number of these items, and it's simply going to take all of these values and throw it at the end of the format string. The commas is going to be, it's like based on how many these values are. And if I do this right now and I select OK, it's going to show you the same stuff as before. So in the table, it works just fine. In the actual chart, it doesn't. I need to make sure that the display unit is showing the correct method. So instead of the format, it's going to show the text. And now we can see that, in fact, we do have the actual text, and we can dynamically select how many decimals you'd like to show, which is very cool, level 3. And this takes me to level 4, which is showing context. And it starts with creating a date table. I'm going to be using Bravo because honestly, I really love how fast it is, and I'm going to off time intelligence, and that's all. Preview the changes, apply the date table, and there we go. Now that I have a dates table, I'm going to make sure it's properly connected, and we're going to date table and connect it to the finance table, date to date. So you can see that the date is connecting to the proper date table. Once that's been done, I'm going to start going back and creating another measure, and we're going to call this one CY versus LY. That is, of course, current year versus last year. And then I'm going to set the format string as something that you might also have seen me do previously. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the current year is the selected measure, the past year is the selected measure, same period last year, or in comparison with the dates. I'm going to divide the current year subtracted by last year over the last year value to get a percentage, and I'm simply, for now, going to format it as this very simple format. How this is going to work is that if growth is not 0, then it's going to take the format of the existing current value, and then it's going to actually have some values that are showing in this place. So I've done this, and I'm going to throw current year versus last year into first this table. And you can see now that I've got a nice level showing me what's the percentage increase in comparison to last year. And I'm also going to throw this into this report. The data labels isn't working. Now this is obviously because I've been using the date from the finance table, and if I change that to the date from the calendar table, it's going to show me some pretty cool thing. Right now, what I've done in this actual dynamic format string is that if there is no growth, it's not going to show anything. It's going to show a space bar, an empty value. But if there is growth, then it will show me something. So what you can see here right now is that for these values, which actually have values in the past, because as you can see, this it's like data set only starts from September 2019, then there will be some data, and otherwise it's going to show you some empty values. Now let's upgrade this, it's like a little bit more, so that we're going to add the automatic display units and the, how do you say it, the decimal selection. And if we do that, it becomes a little bit more convoluted, but it's just the exact same code that I've been pulling in before. All of this is going to be the actual automatic display unit stuff. Here's the decimals, and we throw that all together into a single format. And then we have something quite simple where you can see that there is automatic display units based on what I have selected as the number of decimals, and it's going to show the values that I want. Now you can see here that I am using unichar characters, but you can of course, using the Windows key and the semicolon, select something else. So I can very easily choose to put in an emoji. So it looks something like this and this, in which case that would also be reflected in your data set. Now this is pretty cool, but we need to take this one step further. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to create another table. What I'm doing right now is I'm going to create a table to select whether the year or the month is being displayed. Now, once that's been done, all I need to do is I'm going to put the selected axis as another filter. And depending on what is actually being selected, I might want to calculate the current year versus last year slightly differently. I'm actually going to create a completely new measure for this because I do want to show you what the difference is. We're going to call this current year versus last year or last month. We're going to make this dynamic. And I'm going to throw in the measure. Okay, so the only main difference between this measure and the previous measure is that based on the selected value, it's either going to calculate the previous period as a year ago or a month ago. That's it. No huge difference. As you can see, it's the exact same code all the way down. Looks like a lot, but it's really not that bad. So if I put in the current year versus last year and I unselect the current year versus last year that we made previously, by default, it shows the year, but if I select the month, it will show what the increase or decrease was per month. One thing that I find very nice is that you can actually see the dynamic format string also reflected in the tooltips. And for the final level, we're going to look at highest and lowest value in chart. We're going to go back and we're going to create another measure. So the final measure that we're going to create is going to be called highest and lowest. And this one's also pretty straightforward. Essentially, what you need to do is you need to identify which value is in fact the highest and the lowest. And in order to do this, what you need to do is you need to create a table based on the actual fact table, financials, and upon the date and whatever you actually want to base the calculation on. So right now it's going to be year month because that's the level of date I'm looking at. And the measure is going to be the selected measure. So if we put in all of the selected values within this table, then we can calculate what the minimum value is. The lowest value will be, of course, the smallest iterative value through this, it's a calculated table, or the highest will be max x. So, also the highest iterative value. And this way, if the current value is equal to the highest value, we know that it's the highest value in the visual. And if it is the highest value, then we can format it to be a specific text. We can put in emojis. We can, it's like indicate whether it's high or low. If it's the lowest value, we can give it a different format. And if it's neither one of these, it'll be a space. So we do this. And what that looks like is this, where the highest and the lowest value is being selected. Now, the thing to note is that it looks very strange because you've got, it's like lots of 3 red dots on here. And that's simply because of the y-axis. As I said, the y-axis does not work great with dynamic format strings. If we simply unselect the y-axis, you can actually tell that you have the highest and the lowest, and it is showing at the, it's like right level. This is of course not optimized for automatic display units or the decimal. So if we actually do that, it becomes a little bit larger. But once again, it's the exact same code I've been using before, and everything is as expected. So now it's automatically displayed and it shows the highest and lowest. The final touch that I'm going to add to this piece of code is to simply add the x-axis value. So if we put this as bar x-axis is equal to the date, and which I'm going to put as month, 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 year, year, we can put this x-axis value instead of the highest or lowest. So in this case, what I'm going to do is to that, add x-axis, and do the exact same for the lowest. And what this is going to do is simply put, it's going to allow you to see what month is actually being selected. And what this actually means is that you can get rid of the x-axis and show the highest value is at this part here and the lowest value is at this part here. Taking it one step further, let's get rid of some more things like the titles. Now, looking at this here, what this gives you is a really minimalistic and dynamic chart that will show you what the highest and lowest value actually is. So that about covers it for this video. I hope you've managed to learn something new today. I hope that you can use this new dynamic format strings in your own work. And as always, take care and have a good one.